Hello, I'm doing a book review, and the book I want to review is The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian by Sherman Alexie. Now, this was published in 2007. Now, Sherman Alexie is a Native American, and he based a lot of this book off of his actual experiences. Even though this is a fictional story, like, the characters in the book and the main character are fictional, but he loosely based this on his real life. Essentially, the book is semi-autobiographical. Now, Sherman Alexie wrote several other books and short stories that deal with Native American issues. He also wrote the screenplay for the movie Smoke Signals, which was based on one of his short stories. Now, the plot of The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian is, it's about this 14-year-old boy named Arnold Spirit Jr., who goes by the nickname Junior throughout most of the story. Now, Junior pretty much grew up on this Indian reservation, and for years he has kind of been a social outcast on this reservation. And what happens is, one day after a conversation with one of his high school teachers, he is convinced to start going to this high school in another town, this all-white high school, or predominantly white high school, and his parents allow this, and he starts going to this all-white high school. And while he was already a social outcast on the reservation, him doing this has pretty much caused everybody on the reservation to turn their backs on him, because they feel like he's turning their back on them, and he becomes even more of an outcast. Now, at this all-white high school, he feels like an outsider. Even when he becomes one of the most popular kids at this school, he still kind of feels like an outsider. And the book is essentially a coming-of-age story about him dealing with his experiences at this other high school, while also dealing with this feeling that he's somehow betrayed his own people by going to this all-white high school. Now, The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian is an excellent book, and it's also a really quick read. Like, you could easily read this book in a day, I think. And the book is extremely easy to read, but it's still well written. And this is a very funny book, but it's also a really sad book as well. But what's interesting about this is the story gets really dark and really depressing, yet the book constantly has a sense of humor about itself, even in the parts of this book that are really sad. Like, the main character of this book has a real sense of humor, even when he reaches these really dark periods in his life. And the main character of this book, Arnold Spirit, is honestly a really likable character, but I will admit, though, he does do a few things here and there that even I think are a little dweebish. But then again, he is only a 14-year-old kid, so you gotta cut him some slack in that regard. Like, there's a scene in this book, which is actually a really funny scene, but there's a scene in this book. Now, in the book, Junior has this friend named Rowdy, who is really his best friend, but Rowdy does kind of turn his back on him when he decides to go to this other high school. But there's a certain point in this book where Junior tries to make up with Rowdy, and he goes to Rowdy's house, and he drew a picture of the two of them, and he wants to give it to him, and Rowdy's father answers the door, and this kid's father is like a real dick, and the father looks at the picture and just goes, "Wow, you're kind of gay, aren't you?" It's a really funny scene, but it's also really sad too, because it makes you think, wow, that's the kind of father this kid Rowdy has. And another thing I thought was really interesting about this is the book doesn't give a lot of easy answers to certain questions it kind of brings up. For example, at this high school that Junior goes to, he becomes very popular, but you're never quite sure if it's because these kids at this high school genuinely like him, or if it's because they think it's cool that they have an Indian friend. Like, they're treating it like kind of a novelty rather than an actual friendship. Like, there are a few friends that Junior makes at this high school that I think are genuinely friends with him, but then there are a few others where you're never quite sure if they really do consider themselves to be friends with him or if they're just treating it as more of a novelty. And I liked how the book kind of left that open-ended. Also, as I said, while the book is quite funny, it's also really sad as well. Because ultimately, this book is really about how Native Americans have been treated throughout history and how they're still being treated by society. Like, you gotta figure, these people throughout history didn't just have their land taken away from them, but they pretty much had their entire culture stripped from them and had their culture just kind of stamped out and more or less kind of wiped out in a way. And if you wanted to, you could look at Junior's feelings of alienation from not just the people at his high school, but also from the people of his tribe. You could look at his feeling of alienation as being somewhat symbolic of how Native Americans in general have kind of been alienated from mainstream society. But yeah, once again, this book is really about how Native Americans have been treated by white culture, but also, in a lot of ways, it's also kind of about how they kind of treat themselves and how they view themselves in today's day and age. But yeah, once again, The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian is an excellent book. It's a really funny book, but it's also a really sad book as well. And also, if you consider the social commentary that this book is trying to touch on, it's also a really thought-provoking book as well. And once again, the book is really easy to read. You could probably read this in a day. So yeah, that was my review on The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian by Sherman Alexie, and bye.